It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
It was sung
by immigrants as they struck out to the shores, pioneers who pushed westward against unforgiving wilderness. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
It was the call of workers organized, women who reached for the ballots.
From WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network, the title of our episode, Joe McCarthy's Bus. Joe McCarthy was a person in the 50s that created a hysteria in the country, literally hysteria, in his zealous to fight what he called a communism. He then went about the country with his pal Roy Cohn and found a communist under every rock, in every house, in Hollywood. He even tried to implicate President Eisenhower. President Eisenhower had been the commander of forces in Europe. Now, this is the extent that he went, but the hysteria caused the deaths of countless people, their financial ruin, their families being disintegrated, people falsely charged, in an atmosphere that literally breeded actions that were not American in their nature. They were, at best, hysteria. It was fanned by the media at the time, primarily newspapers, some radio. And the hearings were conducted where these zealots from the South sat there with their mouths dripping with nullification, as Dr. King would say, and brought before the nation with virtually very little evidence at all, other than what they claimed to be association. There was a famous case that was prosecuted by a radio personality that was at the top of his game, named John Henry Falk. He sued and became victorious and found out that a grocer out of upstate New York had literally hired an investigator and put together maliciously false information at the time was seen as factually correct. But upon investigation, they found that this was nothing but lies. And then there was a courageous news person at CBS News named Edward R. Murrow that exposed Gunner Joe McCarthy for what he was, a liar. And that became the end of the junior senator from Wisconsin. But it reminds us of what mass hysteria can bring about, as the humorist from Minnesota, Garrison Keillor, so eloquently wrote in the Washington Post, and he was himself separated, written out of the history of their public radio station there in Minnesota. Today he came out and said that those charges against him were never fully investigated. Stay tuned. But in the well of the Senate today, the senator from Minnesota, a progressive person named Al Franken, came to the dais and spoke to the nation and to his constituency there in Minnesota about his path late in life to politics, how he came to it, the ups and downs of being a politician. It is not a fantastic journey. And this is a man that came out of the entertainment industry, had been in the Senate over 8 years, and was forced by this mass hysteria to resign his office, which in our opinion was an unfortunate situation because his case should have been placed in the Ethics Committee of the Senate of the United States. That was the proper place. That was the place that due process would have been given to Senator Franken. As in the case of our hero, the representative from Michigan, and in particular from Detroit, John Conyers Jr., was himself forced out without an investigation in the House of Representatives. The reason we have these investigations, as in the case of John Henry Falk, is to give due process to people. Because without due process of law, you cannot face your accusers. Their claims cannot be investigated and verified. Just because someone said you did something without any collaborating evidence other than little anecdotal things is what happened to Al Franken, the lady from Los Angeles, the talk show hosts. But they had been in entertainment before on a USO tour, before Al Franken was ever elected to the Senate of the United States. But yet, this innuendo was taken as a fact. Yes, they were acting out a scene, there's no doubt about that. Al Franken fully recognized that. However, what happened there was he apologized to the woman because he was a good and decent man and looking from perhaps her standpoint. But when we look at this individual, she was a pal, a crony of none other than Sean Hannity. That would tell even the village idiot there was more to it than what it appeared to be. Then we had other situations where a woman came forward and claimed that he touched her at the state fair, and her husband took the picture. She was also affiliated with the party of DJ Trump, at least as being a voter of DJ Trump. But yet we had fools in the progressive community that took this as face value, that ran scared, others no more than political opportunists, and various media associated with the liberal cause, the same people that attacked Bernie Sanders in the 2016 presidential race. We don't have to call them out here, but they were followers of Hillary the Monster Clinton, otherwise known as Crooked Hillary. But at the same time, as Al Franken said, there's a person sitting in the White House that admitted to some of the behavior, and that person's in the White House. We have to answer why. Because the political party and the constituency that he represented would hear none of those charges, period. Thus, he came out, angrily denied the charges, said the women were liars, and prosecuted a successful campaign, is now sitting in the White House as number 45. That is a difference. And in Alabama, you have Judge Roy Moore, that used to be Justice Roy Moore. Someone comes out and levels a charge against him from 40 years in the past. And that's set out as a possible derailment to his campaign. But his core supporters, the evangelicals, we assume that they are working from some type of moral compass, categorically rejected those charges. And now the race is a toss-up with slightly going to Judge Moore, who used to be Justice Moore. He could be going to Washington. And the Republican Party, that was never happy about having a Judge Moore in the race, they supported a man named Luther Strangelove, otherwise known as Big Luther, to replace a bigot named Beauregard Sessions, who is the Attorney General. One of those greater issues that we face than any of the machinations surrounding Senator Franken. Senator Franken is not the chief law enforcement officer of this country. He is but a senator, a good and decent man. But unfortunately, when you're caught up in this type of atmosphere, as Garrison Keillor says, this wave of opportunism, get the person at any cost without understanding what the consequences are. We've had an epidemic of charges, mostly of older men in positions of power that have allegedly produced certain acts over the last some 20, 30 years. Bill Cosby, we did a program on that called The Cosby Factor, was the quote-unquote poster man for these charges that came up. They went back through his career. Many of the charges were not validated, but his situation turned into a criminal prosecution. The criminal prosecution was defeated, a hung jury came out, and they will go back once more in the spring. But understanding, at least he got due process of law. Al Franken and John Conyers Jr. did not. And what political ramifications this will have will be seen in the 2018 election. Because what has happened, at least on the right, they have consolidated behind people running. The Republican Party, going back to them, had rejected Judge Moore. Now, this week, DJ Trump will journey to the panhandle of Florida. Pensacola, have a campaign-style rally about 25 kilometers from Alabama, covered by the same media that covers Mobile, Alabama, and his now endorsement of Judge Moore. So those people that support DJ Trump in Alabama, many of them will go to the polls on Tuesday and vote for Judge Moore. And the Republican Senatorial Committee and various other PACs associated with DJ Trump, with the master Bannon, have now put hundreds of thousands of dollars into that race against Doug Jones, a good, decent man. But the consequences of this we'll see on Tuesday night. Does it remain a very close race, or does it not? And when we look at the exit polls and other polls, we'll be able to find out. But in 2018, will the supporters of Al Franken rally to the replacement candidate or to whatever candidate is running for that slot in the state of Minnesota? That will be the true test. I was looking at the paper there that in 1976 they had a very popular governor named Anderson that had defeated the Republican by 80-something%. Well, a vacancy came up in the Senate, and he appointed himself to that particular seat. And when re-election time came up, he was handily defeated. Not only that, the other senator, Senator Humphrey, had died in office, and the candidate running there was for the Democratic Party was also defeated. So you had two Republican senators from the state of Minnesota because of a political blunder. Now, given that was the time in the 70s of Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter's popularity had went down. But at the same time, this opportunism of this Governor Anderson caused a big problem. And the state suffered from that for many, many years. In fact, it took years to regain one Senate seat, and the other Senate seat was not regained until the progressive hero of the late Senator Paul Wellstone in 2000 was able to defeat that particular senator. Now, this is what happens. These are the setbacks that can occur when people get into these frenzies and not really understanding the consequences of what they're doing. No doubt, as we see in the public radio station, many people have left, and many more people will leave as the story unfolds. Perhaps the course for Garrison Keillor would be to sue, because then he would get a semblance of due process and a thorough investigation of what is going on. For Al Franken, that will not happen in the coming months. He will vacate his office, move out. The new senator will move in. Some of the staff, no doubt, will be there. Other parts of the staff will leave. But it's a very, very quick turnaround. You're talking about someone preparing for a campaign in November of 2018. But that preparation will start almost immediately. You will have people jumping into the race. As it put forward now, their governor there will appoint someone to fill the seat. But the speculation is that person perhaps will only be temporary. We don't know who the person will be. The speculation is a lieutenant governor named Smith. Now, Smith has run statewide in the state of Minnesota. Whether or not she will run or not doesn't really matter. But what does matter is the various senators that have come out against Al Franken, against giving Al Franken due process. Kristen Gillibrand of New York, for instance, that wants to run for president. How will that be interpreted in the primary climbs? And the other opportunists that came out there, what will their future be? Including the clown Perez that is the head of the Democratic National Committee. That's the same national committee that stole the election from Bernie Sanders of Vermont. Those people are on the hot seat to begin with. We see their fundraising appeals come out daily, and they're ignored. Progressive people have to get their house in order. We notice that Bernie, we've not seen anything that Bernie has said about this. We assumed Bernie was waiting for due process. And the Senate has a committee, I believe, of 6 individuals, 3 from each party, that is their ethics committee, and they work in silence. And they were the proper venue to have taken Senator Franken of Minnesota. But Senator Franken has now ended his political career. He will no doubt retire, write his memoirs. But they can't take the Senate and his political life out of him, as with Garrison Keillor when he writes his memoirs, or he's writing them. He has to leave out his prairie home companion days and his nearly 40 years or whatever it was at the public radio station there in Minnesota. That will be out of his quote-unquote legacy. That in itself is not a very good thing. We've seen it happen before. We've had commentators criticize the Soviet Union at the time when Khrushchev made his speech that was ill-conceived, where their great leader, Joseph Stalin, was then de-Stalinized out of the history. But now he's back, and this will happen here. The flags will blow. The great wind off the prairie will come in, and the name Franken will be rehabilitated when we understand fully the impact of this political opportunism, this rush to judgment, as Johnny Cochran would say, the late great Johnny Cochran. And that turned out to be a situation that the all-American hero O.J. Simpson was acquitted. But that brought about a reaction also, 2 different ways. The people who now compose this Trump majority were the very people that condemned him. But at the same time, we had so-called liberals condemned O.J., including Bill Clinton, who himself would be forced to show his testicles literally to the court. Now, these things singe around. 1 million men marched, African men, to Washington under the leadership of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan of Chicago, the largest march ever in the history of the United States. Now, these are some things came out that set the stage for then a young lawyer, professor, state senator in Illinois, to run for the Senate and to give a speech at the Democratic National Convention, named Barack Obama. Barack Obama ran, was not given a chance in hell of defeating Hillary the Monster Clinton. He went on to be the 44th President of the United States and was re-elected, all because of the work that numerous people did, and even the campaign of 1984 and 1988 of Jesse Louis Jackson of Chicago was the electoral. So in other words, we're working on two levels. We had electoral activity there, and then also we had grassroots activity that created, as a Tanisha coach said, the 8 years we were in power. Well, we're out of power now. Senator Franken is going to be out of power. We're in the dark days in the woods, but we will come out of the dark days in the woods. There will be a greater day, as the late Paul Wellstone stated many, many times as he drove his bus around Minnesota and drove it on to Washington. So Senator Franken is on the Paul Wellstone bus, not on the bus of Joe McCarthy. Joe McCarthy's bus rides on in America, and the driver is DJ Trump. Whatever some of these people say that are opportunists for a minute. We've had them throughout the history. Various publications, the Huffington Post and others, the same publication that tried to sabotage the campaign with this old fool from Tennessee, Barack Obama. They did not succeed. These are the same clowns that put forward Crooked Hillary, the worst political campaign in the history of campaigns. They did not succeed. And in the grand picture of things, we'll look back on this day as a tragedy, but as a teaching day of what work needs to be done in 2018 and 2020, that progressives, real progressives, not clowns that are masquerading as progressives, need to do to address the needs of this nation, which Al Franken attempted to address. The needs, he made that in his speech. He did not mention African Americans, but again, his constituency was not followers of O.J. Simpson. That constituency was left to John Conyers Jr. Now, how that will affect politics in the Motor City will remain to be seen. And in the state of Michigan, under the administration he'll be leaving, Gateway Snyder, and the Republicans that have turned Michigan into a right-wing state, these things don't happen in a vacuum. Progressives will have to rebuild a progressive party in Michigan, as is what is happening in Alabama. You have to understand, in Alabama, the Democratic Party is the party of people that follow O.J. Simpson. Now, what is happening now is that Doug Jones' election is in the hands of the followers of O.J. Simpson and other people of goodwill in Alabama. Will there be enough? We'll have to see what the circumference of the election is on a Tuesday, because the Republicans are pulling out all stops, no doubt. Now, these other events will not affect what is happening in Alabama, perhaps, Now, the only effect I can see in Alabama is on the side of Roy Moore, that his constituency will become more determined, and people that say that they're undecided now will vote for Judge Moore. Or perhaps they're not undecided, they're a little bit timid to say at this point they will vote for Judge Moore. But we will, as they say, evaluate that election, and we'll be live. This is Boston Red on the 7th of December, which incidentally is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. For those people that were in the Great Patriotic War, that was the beginning of a great war. We're not talking about the nickel and dime conflicts that occurred afterwards. The old-timers would refer to those, the Korean conflict, Vietnam, these so-called conflicts in Afghanistan, in Iraq, that had no material basis. They were fought not in the national interest of the United States. The war against fascism was, but the ironic situation is we had a person that aligned himself with these fascist movements as advisor to DJ Trump named Bannon. And at the same time, we still have Miller, a known fascist, in the White House as a principal advisor. These are the things we should be talking about.
A couple months ago,
not about what happened at the state fair or what happened before a good and decent man even went into the Senate.
We were finally beginning to listen
that there
to
is
women
no independent
about
collaboration
the ways in which
at all
men's actions
of these charges.
affect them.
Period.
The moment
The
was
same
long
thing that
overdue.
happened with John Conyers Jr.
I was
had a
excited
woman
for that
worked there
conversation
11
and
years.
hopeful
We're
that
not saying that the woman
it would result
lied.
in real
What we are
change
saying is more to
that
it
made life
than
better for
meets the
women
eyes.
all across the
She
country
failed to voice stress
and
test.
in
What does
every
that
part
mean? Well,
of
the
our
only way you
society.
can get to that is have investigation of the charges.
Then the conversation
Period.
turned to me.
Now, there was a settlement made, yes.
Over the last few weeks, a number
And
of women
you'd have
have
to
come
look at that,
forward
but
to
we
talk
never
about
had a
how
chance
they
to
felt
look at
my
it.
actions had affected them. I was shocked. I was upset. But in responding to their claims, I also wanted to be respectful of that broader conversation, because all women deserve to be heard and their experiences taken seriously. I think that was the right thing to do. I also think it gave some people the false impression that I was admitting to doing things that, in fact, I haven't done. Some of the allegations against me are simply not true. Others I remember very differently. I said at the outset that the Ethics Committee was the right venue for these allegations to be heard and investigated and evaluated on their merits, that I was prepared to cooperate fully, and that I was confident in the outcome. You know, an important part of the conversation we've been having the last few months has been about how men abuse their power and privilege to hurt women. I am proud that during my time in the Senate, I have used my power to be a champion of women, and that I have earned a reputation as someone who respects the women I work alongside every day. I know there's been a very different picture of me painted over the last few weeks, but I know who I really am. Serving in the United States Senate has been the great honor of my life. I know in my heart that nothing I have done as a senator, nothing, has brought this honor on this institution. And I am confident that the Ethics Committee would agree. Nevertheless, today I am announcing that in the coming weeks, I will be resigning as a member of the United States Senate. I, of all people, am aware that there is some irony in the fact that I am leaving while a man who has bragged on tape about his history of sexual assault sits in the Oval Office, and a man who has repeatedly preyed on young girls campaigns for the Senate with the full support of his party. But this decision is not about me. It's about the people of Minnesota. It's become clear that I can't both pursue the Ethics Committee process and at the same time remain an effective senator for them. Let me be clear. I may be resigning my seat, but I am not giving up my voice. I will continue to stand up for the things I believe in as a citizen and as an activist. But Minnesotans deserve a senator who can focus with all her energy on addressing the challenges they face every day. There is a big part of me that will always regret having to walk away from this job with so much work left to be done. But I have faith that the work will continue because I have faith in the people who have helped me do it. I have faith in the dedicated, funny, selfless, brilliant young men and women on my staff. They have so much more to contribute to our country. And I hope that, as disappointed as they may feel today, everyone who has worked for me knows how much I admire and respect them. I have faith in my colleagues, especially my senior senator, Amy Klobuchar. I would not have been able to do this job without her guidance and wisdom. And I have faith, or at least hope, that members of this Senate will find the political courage necessary to keep asking the tough questions, hold this administration accountable, and stand up for the truth. I have faith in the activists who organized to help me win my first campaign and who have kept on organizing to help fight for the people who needed us. Kids facing bullying, seniors worried about the price of prescription drugs, Native Americans who have been overlooked for far too long, working people who have been taking it on the chin for a generation, everyone in the middle class, and everyone aspiring to join it. I have faith in the proud legacy of progressive advocacy that I have had the privilege to be a part of. I think I've probably repeated these words 10,000 times over the years. Paul Wellstone's famous quote, "The future belongs to those who are passionate and work hard." It's still true. It will always be true. And most of all, I have faith in Minnesota. A big part of this job is going around the state and listening to what people need from Washington. But more often than not, when I'm home, I am blown away by how much Minnesota has to offer the entire country and the entire world. The people I've had the honor of representing are brilliant and creative and hardworking, and whoever holds this seat next will inherit the challenge I've enjoyed for the last 8.5 years, being as good as the people you serve. This has been a tough few weeks for me, but I am a very, very lucky man. I have a beautiful, healthy family that I love and that loves me very much. I'm going to be just fine. I'd just like to end with one last thing. I did not grow up wanting to be a politician. I came to this relatively late in life. I had to learn a lot on the fly, It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always fun. And I'm not just talking about today. This is a hard thing to do with your life. There are a lot of long hours and late nights and hard lessons. And there is no guarantee that all your work and sacrifice will ever pay off. I won my first election by 312 votes. Could have easily gone the other way. And even when you win, progress is far from inevitable. Paul Wellstone spent his whole life working for mental health parity. Didn't pass until 6 years after Paul died. This year, a lot of people who didn't grow up imagining that they'd ever get involved in politics have done just that. They've gone to their first protest march or made their first call to a member of Congress, or maybe even taken the leap and put their names on a ballot. It can be such a rush to look around a room full of people ready to fight alongside you, to feel that energy, to imagine that better things are possible. But you too will experience setbacks and defeats and disappointments. There will be days when you will wonder whether it's worth it. What I want you to know is that even today, even on the worst day of my political life, I feel like it's all been worth it. Politics, Paul Wellstone told us, is about the improvement of people's lives. I know that the work I've been able to do has improved people's lives. I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. For a decade now, every time I would get tired or discouraged or frustrated, I would think about the people I was doing this for and would get me back up on my feet. I know the same will be true for everyone who decides to pursue a politics that is about improving people's lives. And I hope you know that I will be fighting alongside you every step of the way. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.